The latter extent as it were, the search for the cause of a given effect, and to that extent is somewhat hypothetical in character. And I would appear to be taking the liberty simply of expressing an opinion, in which case the reader would be free to express a different opinion. For this reason, I must forestall the reader's criticism by pointing out that the object deduction with which I am here chiefly concerned remains its full force, even if my subjective deduction should fail to produce that complete conviction for which I hope. On this matter, what has been said on page 92 and 93 should in any case suffuse by itself. As regards clearness, the reader has the right to demand, in the first place, a discursive logical clearness through concepts, and secondly, an intuitive aesthetic clearness through intuitions, that is, through examples and other concrete illustrations. For the first, I have sufficiently provided. That was essential to my purpose, but it has also been the incidental cause of my not being in a position to do justice to the second demand, which, if not so pressing, is yet still quite reasonable. I have been almost continuously at a loss during the progress of my work how I should proceed in this matter. Examples of and illustrations seemed always to be necessary, and so took their place as required in my first draft. But I very soon became aware of the magnitude of my task and of the multiplicity of matters with which I should have to. And as I perceived that even if treated in dry, purely scholastic fashion, the outcome would by itself be already quite sufficiently large in bulk, I found it inadvisable to enlarge it yet further through examples and illustrations. These are necessary only from a popular point of view, and this work can never be made suitable for popular consumption. Such assistance is not required by genuine students of the science, and though always pleasing, might very well, in this case, have been self-defeating in its effects. Abbot Terrasson has remarked that if the size of a volume be measured not by the number of pages, but by the time required for mastering it, it can be said of many a book that it would be much shorter if it were not so short. On the other hand, if we have in view the comprehensibility of a whole of speculative knowledge, which, though wide-ranging, has in coherence that follows from unity of principle, we can say with equal justice that many a book would have been much clearer if it had not made such an effort to be clear. For the aids of clearness, though they may be of assistance in regard to details, often interfere with our grasp of the whole. The reader is not allowed to arrive sufficiently quickly at the conspectus of the whole. The bright coloring of the illustrative material intervenes to cover over and conceal the articulation and organization of the system, which, if we are able to be able of its unity and solidity, are what chiefly concern us. The reader, I should judge, will feel it to be no small inducement to yield his willing cooperation when the author is thus endeavoring, according to the plan here proposed, to carry through a large and important work in a complete and lasting manner. Metaphysics, on the view which we are adopting, is the only one of all the sciences which dare promise that through a small but concentrated effort it will attain, and this in a short time, such completion as will leave no task to our successors save that of adapting it in a didactic manner according to their own preferences, without their being able to add anything whatsoever to its content. For it is nothing but the inventory of all our possessions, through pure reason, systematically arranged. In this field, nothing can escape us. What reason produces entirely out of itself cannot be concealed, but is brought to light by reason itself immediately the common principle has been discovered. The complete unity of this kind of knowledge and the fact that it is derived solely from pure concepts entirely uninfluenced by any experience or by special intuition, such as might lead to any determinate experience that would enlarge and increase it, make this unconditioned completeness not only practicable, but also necessary. Tecum habita et noris quam sit tibi cutra supplex. Such a system of pure speculative reason I hope myself to produce under the title of Metaphysics of Nature. It will be not half as large, yet incomparably richer in content than this present critique, which has as its first task to discover the source. This is important. It will be not half as large, yet incomparably richer in content than this critique, which has as its first task to discover the source and the conditions for the possibility of such criticism, clearing as it were, and levelling what has hitherto been waste ground. In this present enterprise, I look to my reader for the patience and impartiality of a judge, whereas in the other I shall look for the benevolent assistant of a fellow worker. For however completely all the principles of a system are presented in this critique, the completeness of the system itself likewise requires that none of the derivative concepts be lacking. This cannot be enumerated by any a priori computation, but must be discovered gradually. Whereas, therefore, in this critique, the entire synthesis of the concept has been exhausted, there will still remain the further work of making their analysis similarly complete, a task which is rather an amusement than a labor. I have only a few remarks to add of a typographical character. As the beginning of the printing was delayed, I was not able to see more than about half of the proof sheets. And now I find some misprints, which do not, however, affect the sense, except on page 379, line 4 at the bottom, where specific has to be read in place of skeptical. The anatomy of pure reason, page 425 to page 461, has to be rearranged in tabular form, that all that belongs to the thesis stands on the left and what belongs to the antithesis on the right. This I have done in order that proposition and counterproposition may be the more easily compared with one another. And that was the preface to the first edition, Kant's Critique of Pure Reason. Next time I will be reading preface to the second edition. Take care.